today's Smart at Home customization webinar. First off, if you would like to access captions, go to the meeting controls on the bottom of your screen and select the CC icon titled Live Transcript. And you can click the option Show Subtitle to gain access to captioning. Alternatively, you can use the stream text link I have just dropped in the chat. This is a great option because you can change the font size, font color, or make the captioning full screen. Please note that the chat is reserved for networking and interacting with one another, so have fun connecting. But any and all questions should be entered in the Q&A located in the meeting controls at the bottom of your screen, or signaled with the raise hand, a function which is also located in the meetings control at the bottom of your screen if this is the most accessible option. We are reserving the last 10 minutes of our webinar for Q&A, and we'll try our best to address everyone's questions with the time that we have. Thank you for sitting through my bit of housekeeping, and I will now hand it off to Catherine.
Thanks, Victor. And thank you everyone for joining us today for the fourth installment in the Ability Tools Smart at Home series, Smart at Home Customization. If this is your first time joining us, welcome, and please feel free to view our previous entries in the series in the Ability Tools playlist and California Foundation for Independent Living Center's YouTube channel. I just dropped the link into today's installment, presented by smart home expert Forrest Holleman from Bay Area Smart Homes and Worldwide Smart Homes, will cover the process of setting up routines, scenes, and customized automations to greatly increase independence, safety, and quality of life. Forrest is a serial entrepreneur, business coach, and innovator who firmly believes technology can fundamentally change lives for the better. Having been involved with home automation since the mid-90s, Forrest is currently focused on using modern smart home/smart building and Internet of Things technologies to help bring a greater sense of freedom and independence to older adults wishing to age in place and disabled members of our community. Ability Tools plans to expand the Smart at Home series into many disability-related topics, such as programming your smart home hub to interact properly with your AAC devices, security, and environmental controls. We not only offer information about smart at home devices during this series, but we also give away smart home devices during this series. In fact, let's give something away right now. Victor, can you please pick a random name from the attendee list to win their choice of an Echo Dot or a 4-pack of smart plugs?
Sure, closing my eyes and I'm gonna point to my screen. Norma Mendoza.
All right. Thank you so much, Victor, and congratulations, Norma. We will email you after the webinar using the email you used to register so that we can get your preferred shipping address and your choice of dot or smart plug set. Remember, everyone, this series occurs every other month and will always be free and available to professionals and the general public alike. Keep an eye out in your emails, your newsletters, or the CFILC events page for our March installment happening on Tuesday, March 29th, 2022 at 2:30 p.m. Pacific time. And with that, I will hand it off to Forrest.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you, Catherine and Victor, for the introduction. We will have questions after the session, and if we run out of time with those, I'll leave my contact information. People can reach out to me individually if that's required. So today we're chatting about using routines, themes, and automations really for increasing the safety and quality of life and independence in those who are disabled, and in some cases are aged adults. So I have automations that run much of my home, as you would expect, and it's very convenient to me when I go to bed at night to say to Alexa, good night, and she will shut off all my home entertainment system. She'll shut off the lights. She'll turn on the lights in the strip lights in the hallway that lead to the bathroom, make sure the security alarm is set, make sure all the locks are set. That's convenient. I can do those things myself, but I just find it convenient. But for somebody who has already gone to bed and they are perhaps wheelchair bound, it's not just convenience, it is a phenomenal empowerment for them. So they can actually have that peace of mind that, yes, everything has been closed down for the night, I'm secure, safe, and I can sleep well. And so we're going to be talking about a number of things that are enabled through just standard smart home technology, but taking it to another level for those who need an increased amount of independence and autonomy, if you will. So I am Forrest Holleman. I've been in technology for nearly my entire adult life, 35 plus years. I've had many of my own startups. I've started doing my own home automation in the 90s, and then many friends of mine decided they liked what I had done, so they asked me to come in and do it for them, and it just evolved over time into an absolute passion that keeps me interested in the latest and greatest technologies, finding out which ones we can apply to certain issues or concerns or problems. And that has brought me to my most current focus, which is really helping disabled and older adults either live in their existing homes or extend their aging in place for another 5, 10, 15 years, so they can live in the home that they've raised their children and things of that nature. So it's a tremendously rewarding application of technology, and we're talking about the various aspects of that today. Just a note, I will be saying, "Hey Google" and "Alexa" a few times through this chat, so you might want to put your smart devices, if you have them, onto mute. So I know there have been a couple of previous events in this series, but I don't know that everyone is on the same page. So I'm just going to start with the basic elements of home automation from my perspective, and mine isn't the only perspective. And then we'll walk into the real magic, which is the thing we're here to speak about today. So the basic components of a home automation or smart building automation environment are the devices. So that could be anything from a simple smart light bulb or a smart switch that controls the light bulb. It could be an automatic gas valve that turns gas on and off, water valve. It could be leak detection devices. It could be motion sensors, smart cameras. There's just a wide range of things. Even today's higher end home appliances have a lot of smarts built in them. So Samsung has an ecosystem called Smart Things, and they've built smart things into their high-end TVs, dishwashers, washing machines, dryers, so they can give you alerts on your phone when a load is done, or they can allow you to control a bunch of your devices from within your TV environment. So it's really being built into a number of things. It's a wide and ever-increasing group of products. Networks are important because the physical network is what connects the devices to each other. That could be on a cable, Ethernet cable. It could be over the wire using Wi-Fi or Z-Wave or Zigbee. These are very home automation specific languages. And that's the next thing we're going to talk about is protocols. So protocol, think of that as a language. So a device connected to another device through Wi-Fi or through a cable, that's just the connection. But if I pick up a phone and call somebody in Japan and I don't speak Japanese and they don't speak English, I still don't have the ability to communicate. So we have these protocols that ensure that devices can talk to each other. And the most common in smart home automation are a version of Wi-Fi, Zigbee, and Z-Wave. And then there's a new one called Matter that is meant to bring all these things together. And so that'll be interesting when that comes online. The next component in a typical smart home environment is a hub. Now, many of you may remember 15, 20 years ago, we would have in our home entertainment system multiple devices. There could be a DVD player, Blu-ray disc player, your audio video receiver, could be a VCR, could be a number of different things. Each one has its own remote. And then there is the introduction of universal remotes, one remote to control all of them. You can think of a hub as that in a home environment or a smart home environment. So a hub is what really is the brains of the environment or the operations, and it controls and talks to all the various devices on the network. It oftentimes acts as a translator. So they can typically communicate across multiple protocols or multiple languages and use any number of the various network connections. So there are hub technologies that are fairly basic. Many of you may have seen the Alexa Echo series, Echo Dot, the Echo Show. There's Google infrastructure. that has a Google Home, the Google Assistant, and there's also HomeKit from Apple that uses Siri. These are all voice assistants that take your commands and then will respond to you, but they also have rudimentary smart home hub intelligence in them. And I'll explain to you why they're rudimentary in a few minutes. Then there's some more advanced hubs. So I talked about some smart things from Samsung. There's an entire ecosystem around that. Then there's some even more very specific local only options like Habitat, and there's a thing called Home Assistant. And these are really complex environments that allow you to have a fine degree of control over the smart home environments and things we can do. The next component I'd like to speak about is the human interface. That's every way we have to communicate as a person to the smart home and vice versa. So it could be speaking to Alexa, Alexa, please turn on my lights. It could be the visual pad on an Echo screen or Google Home screen. And it could also be just physical buttons, or could even be through your computer, right? So that's the user interface. And some of the smart homes that we've set up are very, very rich. We can have a large screen with different dials and widgets and gadgets telling you all kinds of information. It could be a number of video feeds for your cameras. It could be stock ticker at the bottom. It could be temperatures for your different rooms. So there's lots of things you can do in the human interface for the smart home. And then the last, which is the part that I get really excited about, is the real magic that brings all this together. So it's the routines, scenes, and automations that allow us to make great use of all these various components. So what is a routine? A routine in typical English is an activity, oftentimes with multiple steps, that's repetitive. So every morning I get up at 6, I brush my teeth, I go meditate and do some mindfulness for half an hour, do some stretching, start my coffee. Once my coffee is finished, I go and take a look at my to-do list for the day and my calendar, my schedule. Then I will read the first bunch of email and I start my day. And I do that day after day. So it's typically something that's done on a very repetitive basis. And every routine will have a trigger. Something causes me to do that thing. There are the actions, and then there are the actors. So it's me as an actor. It could be if my routine has something to do with my son, he's part of it. It could also be some various parts of technology. So we'll go through each of those and take it from there. Give me just a moment. There we go. So triggers are what cause the start of a routine. They can be manual. So if, for example, I wanted to turn the lights on as I walk in the door, I can hit my smart switch and the lights come on. So that's a manual trigger. I can manually start something by asking Alexa to do something. It's manual because I'm using my voice. There could be a time-based trigger. I'm going to pause for a moment. I saw our interpreter has gone offline video-wise. Is that anyone else seeing that?
Forrest, that is normal. They will swap in and out on their own. You can continue.
Okay, great. Sorry.
Thank
Super.
you.
I just the only one I saw. I just want to make sure people were seeing. Okay, so something could be time-based, a time-based trigger. So if a particular thing needs to happen every day, I have my outdoor lights come on at sunset and they go off at sunrise. It could be location-based. I have got triggers that say every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, as I drive past the local shop, take a quick look to see if there's a list, a shopping list that either my wife or myself have created. And if there's something on there, stop off at the local shop. It could be event-based. So something happens that causes the routine to start. It could be something as simple as a state change. So state change is simply something that was in one state is switched to another. So it could be a physical switch. It could be a temperature has reached a particular preset amount. So think of your smart thermostat or any thermostat. If you set it so that the heat will come on if the temperature drops below 68 degrees, that's a state change. There are presence and absence triggers. So if I happen to be at home, my indoor cameras that I use to look at my dog when I'm gone will be switched off because I don't want cameras recording when there's somebody at home. If both my wife and my phone are gone and not there, because we don't go anywhere without our phones these days, then the cameras come back on. So that's just detecting presence and absence and doing something with that that's useful. There can be biometrics. So we could have facial recognition that can start a trigger, so I can come into my house and just looking at my smart screen, as the moment I come in, it detects that it's me and it turns off my alarm. Same thing with my wife. It'll detect the face and turn off the alarm system. There's a number of different biometric triggers that we can use, and this is particularly useful in the area of disabled and older adults, because you can actually have devices on a person that can determine whether they've fallen or if something is not as it should be in the biometric sense. And then anomaly detection. This is really an important one as well. So if things typically happen in a particular sequence and suddenly they stop, that allows us to do some really interesting stuff. So I'll give you an example. We have a client of ours who a few weeks ago didn't wake up. His wife couldn't wake him up. They brought the EMT in, they couldn't wake him up. Took him into the hospital, put him on a drip, and he was fine a few hours later. Turns out he's diabetic, and his insulin levels dropped to 35. And if his wife had not been home to wake him up, he might not have awakened. And so if he lived on his own, we could have sensors in every room, not cameras, but just sensors that detect motion. And if he normally gets up every morning at 8 o'clock, goes into the kitchen to make his tea, and at 8:15 or 8:30, there's been no motion detected in the kitchen, maybe send out alert over the speakers, over his Alexa device, and say, John, are you okay? If no response, then maybe a minute or two later, get a next door neighbor to go knock on the door. If no response after that, maybe get a son to call or a daughter to call in and find out what's happening. And if still no response, maybe reach out and dial 911, because we're expecting something to happen and it didn't happen. So that's another trigger that's oftentimes used in this particular environment. So actions are what happened once a routine has been triggered. So again, that can be a state change. So temperature hits 60, goes below 68. The state change is turn the furnace on. Or if it gets over 75, turn the air conditioning on. So it could be something as simple as that. It could be as soon as my front door opens and the alarm has detected my face, the panel has detected my face, turn the alarm off. You could also turn the lights on if the time is after sunset or starting to get dark. So there's a bunch of things that we can do as actions. Alerts and alarms, now these are really important, particularly from a safety perspective. So if something happens in the home that needs some kind of response, so stove has been left on too long, or smoke detector has gone off in a room, obviously audio and visual alarms are extremely helpful. If you are somebody who's visually impaired, having audio alarms to tell you something's happened, and vice versa. There can even be haptic alarms, vibration, to let us know that something's happening. We all have these smartphones that we carry with us. Mine is in vibrate mode most of the time. And if I'm sitting here focused on work and I'm expecting a call, I might miss it if I didn't have this haptic thing buzzing and letting me know it's there. So there's a number of different types of alarm systems we can do, or alarm capabilities. And alarms are one thing, but having notifications, messaging, and escalations of those becomes really important. So if something happens in an environment where there's perhaps an older adult that's experiencing an event, or a disabled person, and again, let's go back to that anomaly detection example I gave a moment ago, being able to send text message to a neighbor or to a caregiver or some of that nature, and waiting a couple of minutes for response. And if nothing happens, maybe send email, maybe send a voice or a video call, and eventually escalate to a point where, if necessary, again, call 911 or EMT or something of that nature. That's where escalations and the mixture of alarms, notifications, messaging, and escalations all become extremely powerful. And then one of the other actions that can happen is you can call yet another routine. So or a scene or an automation. So I'll talk about scenes and advanced automations here in a second, but being able to have one action trigger another routine or event environment is something that's become very, very useful, because then we can nest them and do very complex things like, if this happens, invoke this routine. If this other thing happens, invoke a completely different routine. So actors are the third component of routine. So something has to trigger an event, something has to respond to an event, and it can be humans, it could be animals, it could be devices, and it could be other routines and scenes. So it's just what is actually happening in this set of actions. So let's look at what a scene is. So a scene is different from a routine. It's not a set of steps that we're taking typically. It's setting an environment, right? I mean, environmental kind of situation. So it could be changing the lighting, it could be changing the temperature, sounds, it could be opening drapes and blinds. There's just a wide range of different things we can do in our environmental settings. And one of the ones we use at my home very often is movie time. So I can say when it's time for us all to watch a movie on a Friday night, I can even put some interesting parameters and exceptions on the movie time scene. So I can say movie time, and it can take a look and say, it's after 9 and it's a weekday. We're not gonna send out an announcement to anybody. It's just you're gonna have movie time. But if it's before 9 on a weekday or before 10 on a weekend, send out an announcement to the rest of the family. Time for movie. It'll turn the lights, dim the lights. It'll turn the audio video system on. And again, set a whole bunch of other things. Other examples, you might have lights change or an application come on for somebody to remind them that it's time to talk to the kids or the grandkids. Or you could have nice calming music and lighting changed for some calming mindfulness and meditation type things. Or make it energetic and get things more exciting if you're trying to get things fired up for an exercise routine. So there's lots of different things we can do with scenes, but they're very different from a routine. Oftentimes routines will trigger a scene or turn a scene on or off. And the last thing we'll talk about is an advanced customization. So routines are fantastically powerful, and many people can do some pretty advanced routines within, let's say, the Alexa Echo environment or the Google Home environment, but they have the limitations. If you start looking at really complex automations, you need to go beyond just routine. You oftentimes will require some kind of programming environment. A lot of people use a thing called Node-RED, which is a very visual programming environment, allows people to put very complex nested if this, then that kind of actions together. Oftentimes it may require some advanced hardware or custom hardware. So I'll give you an example. I've got a client of mine who's got arthrogryposis. It's a congenital disease, and he's been in a wheelchair his entire life. And he has limited use of his hands. And when I go to visit him, he lives in a multi-tenanted property. I have to dial 309#, and he's got his phone rings. He's got to rush over to a phone if it's not with him. He's got to pick it up. He's got to answer it, find out it's me, and then press the number 6 key on his keyboard to let the front door know to let me in. So what we did is we created just a very small custom electronic device that sits next to his Alexa device, his Echo. And Alexa now answers the calls as they come in. I say, it's Forrest. He says, fantastic. And he just says, Alexa, open sesame. And a DTMF number 6, it's the dial tone number 6, gets sent down the line and the door opens. He doesn't have to touch anything. He can do it from anywhere in his flat. He can do it from his bed if he needs to. So it's just a phenomenal emancipator for him. So he was actually missing situations where somebody didn't wait long enough, or a delivery person just didn't have the patience and disappeared. So it's been a really useful tool for him. And there wasn't something out of the box. We just had to create something for him. Sometimes advanced customizations take great advantage of pattern recognition. So the example I used earlier of John who had his diabetic situation and he didn't wake up. What we can do is put in sensors in every room of the house, and for 4 or 5 weeks, just track his patterns. And again, this is kept in a very safe and secure environment. It doesn't even have to be put in the cloud. It could be something that's stored locally that only he and his caregiver have access to. But what it does is it allows the environment to track his patterns so that it sets it up for anomaly detection. So if something should happen and didn't, or didn't happen and should, new events can take place, or notifications go out, messaging can go out, things of that nature. Oftentimes, advanced customizations involve multiple triggers. So perhaps time and location. So for me, my son needs to be picked up on a Friday at 1:30, 3 on most days. So making sure that I'm reminded, if I'm in a particular place, to go at a particular time to pick my son up is, a very convenient thing for me. Well, we can do multiple triggers to create some very complex event handling environments. We can have conditions. So only do this particular step in the customization or in the tree of events if a condition exists. If that condition doesn't exist, do something else or do a number of other things. And then exception handling. So what that means is we can do all we want to try to use technology to make life easier and simpler for those who need it. But there are always going to be cases where we didn't think of a particular event or a particular thing happening. And so the exception handling says, I've got to a point where I've never seen this event or this happening or this situation before. I need to let somebody know because, again, in my case, as an able-bodied person, it could just be a convenience factor. But for somebody who absolutely depends on the technology, having exception handling to say, if something falls outside the programmed set of parameters or environmental conditions that we were typically expecting, let somebody know because that person may need some help. And then we talked about anomaly detection earlier. So what are some of the obvious benefits of routines and automations? Well, certainly it can be used for enhanced safety and security. A great example of this is a smoke detector goes off in one part of the room, and being able to just not only have all the alarms go off verbally or audio, but turn on all the lights if it's after dusk or before dawn, so that we can easily see a path to get out of the house. Another example of a manually triggered routine that we set up for a client of ours is one morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, his dog went through the dog door, fell into their pond, and he woke up in a confused state, hearing his poor little dog sort of barking for help. And he didn't know what to do. So we put in a physical button. It's just a panic button next to his bed. He presses it, the lights on the outside and the inside come on, so he can more quickly get his wits about him and go get his dog out. So again, the enhanced safety and security is important. The peace of mind. Again, I talked about being able to just be in bed and say, Alexa, good night, and have all the security parameters in my environment set is fantastic. And if there's a door or window that was open, she'll tell us. Cannot set the alarm because the main bedroom window is open. And from my bed, I can say, make exception, I want that window open. So there's a bunch of things we can do from that perspective. One of the other things through pattern recognition and anomaly detection is we can also start looking at, get some advanced notice in the changes of our clients' needs. So if we have somebody who's got a medical condition that changes over time, being able to tell the caregiver or give a log to the caregiver that allows them to see that these changes are happening may be very crucial for that patient's ongoing care. For example, if the person typically answers a phone call within 2 or 3 rings, and then over space of 3 or 4 weeks, it takes them 5 or 6 rings, and then maybe 8 or 10 rings, there might be a change in their condition that a caregiver should know about, or a health caregiver should know about. So being able to have these type of, the ability to track patterns of human interaction and human movement can be extremely useful. And then dramatic cost and reduction, prevention versus remediation. I think it's the age-old expression, penny of or ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I can't think of a more applicable example of that kind of thinking than in the medical sense. So if we can prevent somebody from having an issue, it's so much easier than trying to remediate the problem. And what do all these things bring? Ultimately, freedom and independence for folks. It certainly allows them a much, much greater degree of control of their own environment, and it allows them to just be able to enjoy their environment and have a much richer life. What are some of the typical concerns of smart home tech? This is an important thing for us to contemplate. Privacy and security always come to mind. So some people are very concerned, even to the degree of paranoia, about Big Brother watching all these sensors and cameras and everything. Is there going to be some kind of intrusion in my privacy? Is there going to be security issues? Are people going to be able to hack my PC or my phone because they got access through one of the devices? So that's a big concern, and there's lots of ways of mitigating that. Certainly being able to make sure that we set up a particular channel of the network specific to the smart home devices and make sure it doesn't have access to the internet if that's appropriate. There's lots of ways of making sure that privacy and security are dealt with. Complexity. So that's oftentimes a question that we get from a lot of folks. This is going to make my life more complex. I have all these things to remember. Well, if done properly, we can actually alleviate the complexity, take a lot of complexity out of one's life as opposed to adding to it. And again, having the right user interface, user experience, making sure that if I'm an audio person, that using the smart assistant, Alexa or Google Home or Siri, is maybe more preferential to me. Other people, they're very visual. They prefer to go to a screen, use a touch screen and monitor and manage their smart home tech through that. Some people prefer doing everything on the phone. So it's just depending on what the person's comfortable with. Cost. So what's it going to cost to set all this stuff up? Do I have to do it myself? Is it something that I can get a friend to help? Do I have to go pay somebody to set all these things up? So again, the degrees depends on the complexity of the environment. Ongoing maintenance. Are there any licensing issues to the software that's required for this thing? Latency is oftentimes a concern. So if I turn a physical switch off, it's not a smart switch, the light immediately goes off. If I tell Alexa to turn the light off, how long is it going to take for that to happen? Is it 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 2 seconds? So those are some of the issues that people worry about. Cloud dependence can be a huge issue. And I give you a clear example of that. This gentleman I was referring to, that we put in the device that opens the door for him in his building. About 3 weeks ago, he called in a panic because he couldn't get Alexa to do anything. TV wouldn't change channels or volume. He couldn't get the temperature to change, couldn't let people in. He just didn't know what to do. And so I told him I'd stop by, visit him, see what was going on on my way home. By the time I got there, he said, everything's working again. I don't know what's happening. Well, I got home and found out that Amazon Web Services, AWS, was down for about 10 hours all across the United States. So retail shops were down, a number of services were down, Spotify was down, people couldn't get their email. And in that case, if everything you have is dependent on the cloud, when the cloud fails, you're stuck. Now, fortunately, there wasn't any life-threatening issues. He didn't have anything that was so critical that he couldn't wait for it to come back on. But in some cases, you may have that. And so one of the things we've done for many clients is made a completely locally controlled environment. And that's even with voice assistants. So something like Amazon Alexa, Siri, Google Assistant, they all require a connection to the cloud that's working. Well, there's another couple of options, one called Mycroft, which is a smart voice assistant that sits on your local environment, and it does not do any communication to the outside world. So it learns your voice over time, and it will control everything. If you have a smart home hub, again, that is not cloud dependent. So Home Assistant and Habitat, I mentioned earlier, those are purely local smart home hubs. You can control your entire environment without ever having an internet connection. The only time you need an internet connection is for adding new device drivers or updating software from time to time. But for the most part, everything can be local. So there are ways of mitigating that cloud dependence. Pace of change is another big concern for people. So it's a pace of change in technology. Smart home technology is very nascent, and it is moving and developing at a blistering pace. I have a difficult time keeping up with it, and this is what I do for a living. So can you imagine people who, invested in a Wink smart home hub 3 years ago, and then suddenly a year and a half later, that becomes obsolete. It just doesn't work anymore. They've got to replace it. Well, that's just the nature of the technology. And trying to guess or predict where things are going is what I do, but we're not always correct in our predictions. So just making sure that we create an environment that's easy to take out one component and replace it without having to change everything is one of my design philosophies. So I try to couple things loosely so that if I need to swap out my Alexa Amazon device with a Mycroft device, I don't have to go and change all the different routines and advanced customizations. All I'm changing is the way we access those things. And that is a really important consideration. The second thing that oftentimes in the disabled community and older adults community is the pace of change of the client's condition. So if there's a change, how do we adapt the routines or the advanced customizations that we put in place for that client? How quickly do we need to get in and change the routine to match the condition? So that's another concept or consideration you have in mind. And then last but not least, if it's a multi-person family environment, making sure that you have buy-in from the other members of the house. So making sure that they're all happy that it's going to be Alexa and she can listen to what's going on in place if a wake word is used, making sure that they're comfortable with any sensors that happen to be around. So these are concerns that oftentimes we'll sit down and talk to the family together and say, these are the benefits that it's going to bring, but these are the concerns. Let's chat about them and if appropriate, make whatever changes are required to make sure everyone's happy with it. So our typical approach, and many routines, between the client and the caregiver, they can create it themselves. They can install an Amazon, Echo device. They can get it set up. They can have a fairly meaningful way of adding skills and then creating routines, basic routines with these skills. But sometimes it requires, a full assessment. If it's really for somebody who's needing it for aging in place or for to make a disabled person's life much more convenient and safe, then going and doing a full assessment that looks at the current environment, the ideal environment, and then the delta, the difference between the two, any special needs that we need to think about, their technology preferences. So oftentimes you have almost religious belief in, I'm an Apple family, I don't want any non-Apple Android stuff in here, it's got to be Apple, or vice versa. So sometimes it's a very strong technology preferences people have. Having funding access, so being able to afford the various technologies. We might need to go for a more limited scale if the funding doesn't allow for putting in a more more technologically rich environment, and assessing what the priorities are. So what are the most important things? Because this typically isn't done over a weekend. It's something that we evolve over time, and we address the initial priorities first, and then we start adding to it over time. And then we provide a set of recommendations, technical infrastructure, environmental requirements. Training is a really important one. So having the world's best technology at your fingertips doesn't do you any good if there's a training barrier in the way. So making sure that both the client and any caregivers know how to work with the technology, make sure they know what the wake word is. So one client, for example, he's got his flat, in his bedroom he's got a TV, and in the living room he's got a TV, and we have to use different wake words because they're two different devices and they don't want to get confused if he's got the door open. So we have Alexa, turn on my TV in here, and we have Echo, turn on my TV in there. Just little things like that. So making sure that we train the caregiver, the client on what we've set up, and anytime there's a change made, again, making sure that everyone in the environment is trained on what changes were made. And then last but not least, planning out the appropriate routine scenes and automations that will address all the priorities and provide the degree of freedom that we think technology can bring. So we'll conclude with that, open it up for Q&A. And if we don't have time to cover everyone's questions, feel free to reach out to me. My email and telephone number are right there. And very happy to open the floor.
Thank you, Forrest. Thank you so much for that presentation. As a disclaimer, here we go. In regards to a term used earlier in the webinar, we all know disability language is an ever-evolving lexicon, and those who are not deeply involved in the community might not be aware of the current accepted terminology. CFILC wants to reaffirm our commitment to disability positive language with phrases such as wheelchair user and intellectual disability. We understand that having open and honest discussions about the proper use of language and how it impacts our community, while recognizing everyone's individual educational journey, only serves to expand its usage. And while we let people throw some questions into the chat, let's go ahead and give away another prize. Victor, can you please pick another random name from the attendee list to win their choice of an Echo Dot or a 4-pack of smart plugs?
Yes, Christine Fitzgerald.
Thank you so much, Victor. Christine, congratulations. We will email you after the webinar using the email that you used to register so that we can get your preferred shipping address and your choice of the Dot or the smart plug set. Now let's move on to the Q&A portion of our webinar. We do have a question that came in that is asking what the cost to set up routines by the hour. Is it by the hour or is it by the job?
So that can be tackled in a number of ways. One of the things that Catherine and I have been chatting about, one of the things we've been talking about recently is setting up a series of how-to videos for people. So the first thing is if we can get people be able to set up basic routines on their own, that's a great step forward. But sometimes there are going to be things that are going to be a bit more complex and challenging. So we can do things on an hourly basis or a project basis. Typically, we do an assessment first and say, what are the needs? And then based on that, take a look at the complexity and can present a formal proposal if that's required, if we need that for getting funding, for example, or we can just do things on an hourly basis. So, and there are plenty of other organizations like mine that do similar things, so that we oftentimes collaborate with other companies in the market to bring solutions together. So if it's multiple parties that are involved, oftentimes making it a specific job or a statement of work with very predefined outcomes is the way to go. So it's variable. There's no one size fits all kind of answer to that.
So we have another question that's asking, what's one of the more unique routines that you've helped set up?
One of the more unique routines. I've got a client who lives in a fairly remote area. They don't have reliable internet. They have lots of interesting animal visitors that come around, and they were challenged by things going missing in their shed. And so we put some cameras and motion sensors and things of that nature, trying to make sure that we captured whatever was going on in this environment. And turned out it was their own cat that was going in through a drain hole and stealing things from the feedstock. And so we ended up putting a little chip on the cat's collar that would allow it to go about its merry business, but if it went anywhere near the shed, it would send out an alert that the cat didn't care too much for, and it would also alert the client. That was an interesting one. There are just a number of funny little things that we've done that involve animals and animal detection and prevention. That's the first one that popped into mind.
That's great. Thank you, Forrest. We have someone with a raised hand in the attendee list. Victor, can you go ahead and give Paul the ability to use his mic?
Okay, and I just unmuted you, Paul, so go ahead.
Good morning, good evening. My name is Paul from Kenya. I would like to inquire how you can extend such services to us, and also how we can get low cost support, because we know that Africa, we are not economically empowered. I am a person with a visual disability. I'm a blind person, and really enjoyed some of the discussions which have been held here. How can we collaborate?
Great. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the question, Paul. You probably asked the right person. I lived in Africa for 17 years. And so I've got lots of contacts ranging from Angola all the way down to Cape Town. And I certainly know of a handful of folks in the Kenyan space that I could probably put you in touch with. And if I don't, if they're not the right people, they will know who. So feel free. My email address and telephone number, well, telephone number probably is not appropriate, but feel free to reach out to me by email. And that's Forrest, Forrest, at bayareasmarthomes.com. And I will see what I can do to connect you with somebody.
That was amazing and unexpected, Forrest. Thank you very much. And thank you for your question, Paul. I have another question that's come in from Joshua asking, he says that I find that sometimes not all vendors sync with automation. Are there preferred vendors that you rely on for smart home devices due to ease of use?
Yeah, Joshua, that's a great question. And again, ecosystems that are proprietary are pretty common in many technology spaces, and no more so than the home automation space. So Apple HomeKit, typical with anything Apple. If it's all Apple, it works fantastically well. But if it's anything that's not Apple, maybe not. Same thing in some of the other environments. I have a lab that does its best to make everything integrate. So I've got a lab where I've got HomeKit, I've got Google Assistant, I've got Alexa, all doing things together, and routines that cause them to do things together. But that can be complex. As long as we stick to industry standard protocols and things of that nature. So if we're all talking, all of our devices are on Z-Wave or on Zigbee, or we're using a hub that can talk to both, that makes things a lot simpler. And as Matter, M-A-T-T-E-R, used to be Thread, but as Matter comes online, that is being supported and endorsed by Apple, Google, Amazon, I believe, a handful of others, a lot of the industry titans that are all agreeing to this common standard, which is called Matter. And as that rolls out, I think there's going to be a lot fewer integration issues. But certainly you're absolutely right. I mean, trying to integrate a Nest thermostat into a environment that's got Ring doorbells and Ring cameras, and trying to get it all controlled by one environment has, it's caused some certainly challenges for people over the years, but it is becoming simpler. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you, Forrest. That was great. And while I give people more opportunity to drop more questions into the chat or into the Q&A or to raise their hand, I do want to say that Forrest is a wealth of information that he has agreed to work with us to try and figure out ways to get this information out to everybody to be able to set up routines. And if you have any questions or any particular concerns or thoughts, anything that you think might be interesting to learn about, please do reach out to us. I'm going to go ahead and put my email in the chat also, so that we can take suggestions, because we want to see this series go in the direction that's going to be beneficial for everyone. And I am not.
I see one more question from Ian there.
Oh, there we go. Thank you so much. So Ian is asking, what are some basic questions that we should ask ourselves when starting to prepare to create a smart home for our needs?
So that's a super question. And oftentimes it comes down to, are we doing it in an existing home, or is this going to be a new build? That's a major consideration. If it's a new build, we can have Cat7 or fiber cables put in the walls and things of that nature. If it's a retrofit, we're having to put smart technology into an older home. A whole bunch of questions we have to ask there. I mean, how old is the home? I'm just giving you a silly example. Homes here in California that were, let's say, older than I think 1970, they didn't have a common wire. So in the electrical thing, you have your live line, you have a common, and you have a ground. In light switches, many of them before 1970, maybe even 75, don't have a common. So you can't put smart switches in many of these places or you have to use a very special type of switch. So just getting an understanding of what the environment is first, and what is it we're trying to accomplish? What's the real purpose for it? Is this just convenience? Are there safety and security issues? All those things help form or inform which technologies we're going to use. And then that also helps determine which hub choice. And again, oftentimes people will make the unfortunate mistake of buying a bunch of devices and then eventually figuring out I need a hub for them. If we can think which hub is going to suit our needs first, then find devices that fit them, that's generally a smarter approach. I have an example. He's a perfectly able-bodied character, but he's a friend of mine who went out and bought a bunch of TP-Link switches, and so he needs an app for that. And he bought, Sonos speakers. So he bought an app for that, and he's got all these different things. A Ring doorbell's got an app for that. So he's got 30 apps on his phone that he has to use to control his smart home. And trying to get them all now to talk to a single hub is a challenge. If he had started with a hub choice first, then determined the appropriate devices to attach to it, it would have been much easier for him. So I hope that answered the question.
Great, thank you, Forrest. And we have 2 more questions and a raised hand. Hopefully we can get it in the couple minutes we have left. So we have someone asking, what is the difference between the different Echoes, between the different Alexas and Echoes, Echo Dot, etc.?
Yes, so think of Echo as the hardware that Amazon sells. Alexa is the brains and the voice assistant. And so the Echo Dots were the first things that came out, the version 1. Then there's the full-on Echo speakers. There's Echo Show, the Echo Show 5, 8, 10. I think they're getting bigger. So that gives you the visual component and a camera as well. And then there's the Alexa built into many, many third-party environments as well. Right here, where I'm in a little Airbnb this week. There's a microwave. It's got Alexa built into it. I haven't discovered what exactly I can do, but I think I can ask her to, turn on high for 3 minutes without using my fingers. It's not particularly useful to me, but I can imagine some people would be. One thing I did notice that was useful, the power went out, came back on, and it took about a minute, and the time was set appropriately. I didn't have to go back, and I didn't get this flashing 0000 or, dot. It automatically did it. That's one of the advantages of having smarts built into a device. So there's lots of different devices now have Alexa. So the Alexa is the brains, the voice assistant. The Echo is just the Amazon specific hardware to house it. That makes sense?
Yes, that's perfect. The ability to not have to reset alarm clocks every time the power goes out sounds amazing.
It is. So simple little things like that make our life easier.
Let's go ahead and Victor, if you can go ahead and enable Juanita to be able to turn on her microphone to be able to ask her question, that would be fantastic.
Yes, go ahead, Juanita.
Okay. Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, Forrest. So I just wanted to start off by saying I really enjoyed your presentation, and I have learned personally a lot through this series to where I have started making my own home a smart home. And I am a person with a visual impairment. So a lot of times I have missed out on the visual displays of things. So like I just recently got a Google Nest for to control my temperature. So that's really amazing to not have to wait for someone to change my temperature. So I did have a question. One thing that I'm still kind of struggling with is the lack of accessibility for washers and dryers. Is there a way to connect a washer and dryer to like a smart device?
There is. So you get 2 things. It's you want the alerts that a load has been finished, and you also want to be able to turn things on and off, right?
Yes.
And so what I've done in my own home, because I had a similar interest, is there's a smart plug that you can put between the washer and the mains outlet, and that can be used to turn power off and on, but that still doesn't allow you to manually or physically get a machine going. But what it can do is tell you that the power is being used or not. Another approach is you can take like a SmartThings had a multi-purpose sensor. It senses temperature, humidity, motion, and vibration. And I had one of those on my dryer and one of those on my washer. And as soon as the dryer cycle would stop, I'd get an alert. If no vibration was detected, over a minute, I get an alert saying the laundry's done or the dryer is done. Same thing with the wash. If it noticed no vibration on the machine after a minute or 2 minutes, I get an alert. So those are two simple ways of doing it. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there's some high-end Samsung, LG, GE washers and dryers out that have all this built in now. You can set schedules as to when you want it to be washed. You can set things to, you can even have it, set off an alarm in another part of the house if that's what you need, not just on your phone. So there's lots of ways of doing that. That make sense?
Yes, thank you.
And we are getting to the end of our time. So I would like to go ahead and stop there since we don't have any more active questions, and thank Forrest for coming and explaining all of this wonderful information to us and being so receptive to provide all of these resources to our community.
My pleasure. Really, it's been a pleasure to be here, and feel free to reach out. I'm serious. If somebody's got a question that comes up afterwards, don't be shy. Send me an email, give me a call. Happy to take it.
Yeah, and if anyone happens to miss Forrest's email for any reason, you most likely have mine, or you can call Ability Tools or email info@abilitytools.com, and we'll connect you up with them. All right, thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you so much for your participation, and we look forward to seeing you in March.
Thanks a lot.